Over the last few seasons, a lot of Bulls fans have asked for this team to go on a rebuild. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about why Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu have basically become that rebuild that a lot of Bulls fans are asking. I'll explain that on the show. We're also going to preview the game tonight against the Portland Trailblazers and dive a little bit into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform that we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content. So, throughout the struggles of the last few seasons for the Chicago Bulls, a lot of Bulls fans have called for this team to go full rebuild. And while AK and Eversley have very much showed that a full rebuild isn't coming, I'm going to tell you guys why we've kind of got that in a pseudo way when you look at Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu leading the youth movement for the Chicago Bulls and with other young players down the way, right? But before we get into that, I want to kind of explain my thought process, right? When you go through a rebuild, you're looking for foundational pieces, or you're trying to be bad long enough to where you can get that top draft pick to really get you that generational talent, that superstar talent that's going to help increase the ceiling of your Chicago Bulls, right? So there's a couple of different ways to go about it, but when you look at the Bulls specifically, we're not going to talk about the Mike and the MJ and Scotty Bulls because, yeah, that was different. You had the greatest player of all time, right? But when you look at the way that the Bulls have done it before, right, when they've come out of rebuilds, you had the Kirk, Heinrich, Ben Gordon, Luol Deng kind of core Chicago Bulls, right, which and by no stretch of the imagination were a championship contending team, but that was a team that Bulls fans loved. They were highly respected around the league, and your favorite and anybody else's favorite team did not want to play the Chicago Bulls because they understood how difficult of a test it was going to be to play against that team night in and night out. That team played great, right? Even had a season of sweeping the defending champion Miami Heat in the playoffs. Added Ben Wallace, things like that. That didn't work out for the team. They had one bad season, the season of Joakim Noah's rookie season, and then that team kind of went down, right? Like they had one bad season, and then they were able to draft Derrick Rose, and that gave them that superstar level talent that the team needed. At that point, you move forward with the core. You know, you had a few years under Vinny Del Negro, Kirk Heinrich was still there, but then that team made its move, right? They made its move to build one of the best teams in the league at that point in time, and that core is pretty much built around Rose, Deng, Joakim Noah. Yeah, you had Carlos Boozer on that team. You eventually, draft Taj Gibson, who turned into a really solid player for that team, and then you had that bench mob. But that was a team that had the best record in the NBA 2 years, 2 times out of that. And then over that time, you drafted really solid players as well, right? And then Rose had this injury. We move on then. The core at that point becomes basically Rose, Jimmy, Pau Gasol with Taj Gibson still there, things like that. Joakim Noah was still there for a little bit of that time as well before he eventually moves on, him and Derrick Rose. And then you start getting into the point where it struggled, right? The team made a trade. They did not know how to build around Jimmy Butler. Of course, we also had the 3 Alphas year and stuff like that, right? But then you move on you get Zach LaVine, you get Lauri Markkanen, you get Chris Dunn, and that Bulls team was hoping that Lauri and Zach and Dunn were going to be foundational pieces, well, more so Lauri Markkanen and Chris Dunn, because they almost traded Jimmy Butler for Chris Dunn the prior year straight up for nothing else. But we're going to talk about that, right? So then you start trying to build around that, and that's when things started to go left. Gar Forman, John Paxson did not have that same mindset on how the team fit, how the pieces fit together, right? And that's what they had earlier, what John Paxson had earlier when he drafted Kirk, when he drafted Ben Gordon, when he drafted Luol Deng, when he brought in Andres Nocioni, right? Those type of moves that we had, he was looking at the fit of those players together, and we had a coaching staff, and those players were developing. When you moved on to the era of Zach LaVine and Lauri Markkanen, and hoping that those players were going to turn into something for you that you can then build off on. You draft players like Wendell Carter Jr. You draft players. Coby White was also drafted in that time period as well, right? You draft Daniel Gafford. You get Bobby Portis. You get these players over that stretch of time, and unfortunately, they didn't all just work out together, right? We weren't able to build that foundation again because that front office at that time under Gar Pax was drafting players, but didn't have the coach to develop them, didn't have the right scenario to develop them, didn't really draft players with the thought process of how they were going to fit together over long periods of time, right? And develop together. And that's where you kind of failed at. When you're looking at a rebuild, we are trained to think that a rebuild means fail until you get your Joel Embiid. And very often those players don't come even in a rebuilding tanking, you start building the team slowly over time. Well, Coby White and Ayo have shown this season. Now, it's up to them to show that they can do it over multiple seasons, but they have now showed themselves to be building blocks of a solid core for the Chicago Bulls. When you look at the way that Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu and how their talent fits together and overlaps really good together, right? You got Coby, who's made a leap this season, right? Going from averaging 9 points per game to almost 20 points per game in the season, being, starting only 23 games. Playing only 23 minutes last season. Now he was leading the league in minutes before he went down, right? Only started 2 games last season. He started every single game for the Chicago Bulls until he missed 2 games recently. Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu have showed themselves, much like Kirk and Ben. I'm not comparing the players, but much like those players showed that they can be foundational pieces, or even Kirk and Dang, depending on how you want to look at it, can be foundational pieces to a very solid to playoff team. You got to start building around that, right? And building a team that fits together. Yes, you're still hoping for your superstar level talent to help bring you over the top and clearly make it a clear path that you have a team that can be a perennial playoff team that could win playoff series. And then you're going to hope to get to the place of, hey, let's go to the conference finals. But you still have to build that solid foundation up until that time. And it's not just Ayo and Coby. Those are the players that have ascended the most. Still got Patrick Williams on this team, which the team is going to, re-sign more than likely and hope that he's going to keep developing. You got Julian Phillips, that showed a lot of flashes. Dalen have showed a little bit of flash as well. But team who you came in there and brought, are these players starting to sound like players that we've had before in the sense of those things, right? So you're hoping that you're gonna do that, and it's up to this front office now to continue to build on this foundation this young foundation that Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu's ascension has now given this team that platform to do that, right? Am I in any way saying that Coby and Ayo are going to be the all-stars for the Chicago Bulls in the future? I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that they give you a nice, solid foundation. Now the front office has drafted some nice developmental players, right? Players that we knew were raw. We're going to need some serious development coming into the NBA level. We knew those type of things. Now it's time to see if this team can draft for need and for fit. That is the next phase of this team and how this front office needs to draft in this upcoming draft. Can you draft for need? Can you draft for fit, right? If you go need, cool. That's fine. That's their needs. So you want to fill those needs. But if you can't find those needs, can you draft for players that are going to fit the foundational pieces that you now have on this team in Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu? That doesn't mean you jettison off your veterans. That doesn't mean that you go full rebuild. That doesn't mean you start selling pieces just to sell them off. But it does mean you're starting to lay that foundation of a base that works and fits together so that you can, when you do get that superstar, so when you do, or if somebody either wants to come here, you do get lucky, right? Whatever it is, you have a base that player's jumping on. One of the reasons that Derrick Rose was able to be Derrick Rose right away, develop over time. Yeah, it was his own mentality. He had the right coach to do it, all those type of things. But it also was that he wasn't stepping in to a situation where it was just him. He was stepping into a situation where he had Noah. He was stepping into a situation where he had Kirk Heinrich. He was stepping into a situation where he had Ben Gordon for at least that first year, scoring and doing those things off the bench. He had a foundation of eventually Taj coming to that team, right? So it's building that foundation and laying it right. And when you do that with youth, rather than doing that with free agent signings, rather than doing that with going out and trading for veterans, whatever it is, when you do that with youth and that provides that foundation, it helps kind of build something more sustainable. And that's what this team has right now, is they have a base that they can build something sustainable on. It's not guaranteed that they will, but they have the ability to build something sustainable on. It's up to the front office to capitalize off that in the best ways possible to put this team in a situation and position that we want to be in. That's up to this team to do that. Now, can they do it? That's the bigger question here, is can they do it? We'll see. Ultimately, I think I have a lot of faith in the Chicago Bulls team and what they're able to do. I have faith that this team can do some in this front office. And I think also with the fact that we now have a player development staff, it helps kind of have more faith on those raw pieces that you drafted, them actually turning into something. Julian Phillips this season has shown the mindset and mentality, right? Yeah, it sucks that he's going to be out 2 weeks, things like that, but he's shown those type of things. Now, how do you build off that? And we know that we need another young big, or we can use some help out on the wing, especially if DeMar ends up leaving. But you have players now on the wing that you need to develop and prioritize. And if you do that, we can start seeing that foundation laid even stronger for the Chicago Bulls. And yeah, it's going to still be some tough years in there. Yeah, we're not going to be the team that we want to be yet, where we're winning first round playoff matchups and pushing top seeds to things. We're going to have some inconsistencies for sure. But now with the foundation that you've laid there, hopefully those inconsistencies can get a little bit better. But you guys can let me know what you guys think on that. I hope that this is the case for the Chicago Bulls, and maybe I'm being a little bit too optimistic, but Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu and their growth this season has really given a lot of kind of changed the mindset a little bit about what the Chicago Bulls team can be in the long run. You just got to make sure that you have the front office that then can draft off fit and need, and that is the next step of this. Can this front office truly draft for fit and need well? Can you do something other than just drafting these raw developmental project pieces that are going to need a lot of work? Can you draft off fit and need? And then how do those players end up developing? That's the next phase for the Bulls to me, but you guys can let me know down below. What do you guys think about all of this? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it for sure. Now, with that said, let's go get into the next topic for today. Okay, so the Chicago Bulls have the Portland Trailblazers coming in the building today. And, when you face off against the teams that are supposed to be the easier teams in the league, you should kind of look forward to that. But, sometimes I look at this and say with this Bulls team, it's kind of more room for possible disappointment because we know that the Bulls haven't always taken care of business the best way that we think that they should against some of the lesser competition in the NBA. Now, they did it last game, against the Washington Wizards. Let's hope they can do it again against the Portland Trailblazers and take care of business. And when you look at who we're facing in the Portland Trailblazers, this is a team that is the 28th ranked offense in the entire NBA. They're 29th in field goal shooting percentage at 44.2%. They're 25th in three-point shooting percentage. They're 26th in rebounding. They're 27th in turnovers, right? They don't take care of the ball. All those things should shape up to, if a Chicago Bulls team is locked in, they should be able to take care of business against the Portland Trailblazers. But the thing is that we haven't always seen this team locked in. Coby White's listed as questionable right now. As far as this recording, he hasn't been completely clear. They haven't said that he's going to be playing for sure tonight. But regardless of that, this Bulls team should have more than enough firepower to take care of the Portland Trailblazers, mainly because they're not a good offensive team. They're not a good defensive team either, and we'll talk about that. They're more middle of the pack defensively, which is crazy, but they're terrible offensively. They're terrible offensively. The 28th ranked offense in the league. The Chicago Bulls defense should be able to come in here. If you have the proper game plan, if you play with the right amount of heart, you should be able to take care of this Portland Trailblazers team. But that, again, if this Bulls team did what they should do, we'd be having a lot better record than what we do right now. We'll probably be actually at 500. So the thing is, this team, you have to be locked in. You have to understand defensively, much like you did against the Washington Wizards, give it no chance, give it no room. Come out right away, play efficient offense, play efficient defense, and push this lead. And don't let up once you have the lead, because you don't want to give the team an opportunity against the Portland Trailblazers, no team, right? When you look at it as well, defensively, they allow 115 points per game. That's not the worst in the NBA, right? So they're better defensively than they are offensively, but it still leaves more than enough room for the Chicago Bulls offensively to do their things. They also allow 10 offensive rebounds per game, which is one of the higher numbers in the NBA. So Vooch, Drum can feast, and we should be able to get second chance points again against this Portland Trailblazers team. And in no way am I saying that the Bulls should just blow them out. I want to say that, right? But I am a realist in seeing how this team has performed at times this season. But the thing is, take care of business. Come in. Coaching staff, I'm looking at you guys. Players, I'm looking at you guys. Play with that heart and determination that we've seen before. DeMar DeRozan in the last game against the Wizards really allowed Vucevic, Ayo, and some of the younger players to really thrive, and he kind of picked his spots. If we're able to put DeMar DeRozan in that position again, to where he can kind of pick his spots and those type of things, it's going to go great for the Chicago Bulls and for DeMar DeRozan in that time. So this team has to be prepared, and you cannot overlook what it is. And if you allow DeMar DeRozan to be that player again that can kind of facilitate, that can pick his spots, right? And if need be, if DeMar does need to go DeMar DeRozan mode to pull this game out, I think that says a lot about the performance of the supporting players. But let's hope that that's not the case again tonight. Let's hope that this team can take care of business against a Portland Trailblazers team that they should be able to win against, and we'll see if they take care of that business. But guys, thank you so much for sitting through with that. Let me know what you guys think on this game against the Portland Trailblazers. What are your biggest concerns? How do you think the Bulls are going to fare in this? But with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the mailbag for today. We got 2 voicemails to kind of clear out the mailbag for the week. This one's from Marvin.
Hey, it's Marvin again. I didn't get a chance to finish because I know it's going to run out, so I wanted to finish it off by saying this. I compared Vooch to 2 of today's top centers. Now I want to compare him to 2 of the legends of the game, and that would be first starting off with Akeem Olajuwon. In his 14th season, guys, he averaged 16 points and 9 rebounds, but he only played 47 games. Hey, he averaged 34 minutes a game. That's not bad. But look at Vuce now. Remember when I told you about Vuce, guys? This is his 14th season. He's averaging what? 18 and 10. And then the second one I want to compare him to is the legend, Shaquille O'Neal. In his 14th season, guys, he averaged 20 and 9 while only playing 58 games. Now, I want to tell you guys Vuce's stats so far this year. He's already played 63 games, guys. Model of consistency, I said that. He's averaging 18 and 10. I'm not saying he's one of the best centers of all time. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying we do not understand how much he means to this team and to every team that he's been on. Vuce is a decent center. I understand his defense is not nothing compared with Shaq's defense. But if we're going to talk about Vuce, you better go back in the history. You better look at his numbers, and you better know what you're talking about centers in the NBA. One thing about Vuce, he's still a third option. And listen to those numbers again. 18 and 10, 14. All I want to say.
Vuce is important to the team. I think I get what you're saying in Vuce and his production, but we all know, right? The numbers are the numbers, and that's fine. And Vuce does have great numbers, which he does help the team out. But we know sometimes as well that Vuce's defense has been a huge liability for the Bulls. Him falling in love with three-pointers at times has been hurtful for the Bulls as well. And ultimately, we know what Vuce can be. And Vuce is still, especially for his age, is still a player that can make an impact. And I do think as well with the roster, if we had a roster kind of was better suited to kind of overcome some of Vuce's shortcomings, that we'd be in a much better situation to really kind of take appreciate the good things about Vuce and not necessarily just hang on the negative as much. But Vuce is a very productive player, still in the age, averaging 18 and almost 11. You can't deny that on a fairly efficient shooting as far as in the paint. That three-point shooting percentage really does kill his overall field goal shooting percentage. But outside of that, Vuce is still an important piece of this team. But I do think that we need to start preparing our center of the future, whether that means drafting one, signing one. I don't think Adama Sanogo shapes up to be a starting center in the future, but you never know. I've learned not to put a cap on players' potential, right? So you never know how that's going to turn out. But ultimately, I think when it comes down to it, Vuce, people who look at basketball understand what Vuce does well, like high-level thinking. The people who kind of just casually watch basketball, look at stats, they're never going to really appreciate that. But let's not act like it's all sunshine and rainbows for Vuce, because it's not. And even in me understanding what Vuce does bring to the team and understanding why some of the whys behind some of his bad play at times, you still can't overlook the fact that it's still bad play at times, right? And still is hurtful for the team. And yeah, he was never meant to be a defender. Much like I've given DeMar DeRozan, you didn't bring Vuce in here for his defensive prowess. You brought Vuce in here for what he can do offensively, passing-wise. I think sometimes we don't even use his facilitating as much as we should either. But that's kind of just my mindset. But great voicemail there from Marvin. Let's get into this next one. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Haize? This is Shay. I was thinking, man, would you say that this is DeMar DeRozan's most productive? This is DeMar DeRozan's most productive year on and off the court that he's ever been with any team. Like, look, I know what people gonna say. Oh, he had good years in Toronto. He had a good year in with the Spurs, but think about it. I think his time in Chicago will be the most sought and the most impacted that he's ever had on and off the court, because I feel like this. Think about it. He managed to still stay productive, and then he helped the young guys flourish in their game when it comes to Coby, Patrick, and Ayo Dosunmu, and I think that will be most remembered in his career throughout, as his career slowly starts to wind down. Like, this is literally the most productive he's been on and off the court. Not number-wise, but, like, in terms of, like, playing skill-wise and having a group full of, like, pupils-wise, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is like a veteran leadership-wise. I feel like this is probably the most productive team that he's probably ever been on. Most productive he's ever been on the team when it comes to, like, on and off the court, and, like, something that players could take along with them. That's what I mean. I could be wording it wrong, but anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
Shay, I gotta ask you, DeMar DeRozan's most. What do you smoke? What kind of weed are you smoking? What type of weed? Like, it's got to be something that we don't have access to. Like, I get what you're getting at, and I think it comes down to wording. Productive on the court was definitely his first year here, at least for us And I also think that he had productive years off the court as well with the San Antonio Spurs, because you look at how many young players that he did help guide and mold there as well in his short time there. So here's what I'll say is that DeMar is impactful. And I think that when we, regardless of his career or anything like that, using that wording, I've said before that the lessons that Pat, Ayo, Coby, Julian Phillips, right, these guys, Dalen, these guys have learned from DeMar DeRozan as far as work ethic, as far as mindset. Those are going to be things that they look back on even later in their career. Hopefully they're still in the NBA, and they look back at that and say, listen, this is something that DeMar actually taught me. And I do think for that case, he is making a huge impact off the court for the mindset and mentality. But also one thing I'll say is that we got to stop. I get it. DeMar is a great mentor, but development, I think it's time to start giving credit to the development staff that we have here. I get it. I know a lot of people are like, well, we got to keep DeMar around for development. I think that's why you have a development staff, right? If I think that they should be more important and impactful in the development of your young pieces than what a DeMar DeRozan can be. Now, he's good for, like I said, the work ethic, the understanding how to go in and out, right? Those type of things, which are important to development as well. But let's just not lay it all on that. I think we need to start giving that to that player development staff. Now, they've only been here one off season, but as we continue to see the work that they do with these players, I think it's time to start giving them the majority of the lion's share of the credit when it comes down to that, at least in my personal opinion. You guys can have your own opinions on that, perfectly fine, but that's kind of the way that I look at it because, yeah, DeMar's been great for these players, but I think when you go over the long-term success of these players working on mechanics, things like that are actually going to impact how quick their shot gets off, right? Those type of things, that's the player development staff, and I think we need to start putting a little bit more respect on their names for sure, but, DeMar is having an impact for the Chicago Bulls. And, we'll see if that continues, at what price and stuff like that. But it'd be remiss. One thing that I've never knocked on DeMar DeRozan, even in my time of not being the biggest DeMar DeRozan fan, has been how important he has been for the young players, at least on the mental part of the game. Hasn't always translated to on the court, right? Like with Patrick Williams and things like that. But I do think that, he's been a very important part of the development of the young players in that area. So absolutely. But that's my time for today, guys. We'll be live for the pregame, halftime hangout, and postgame shows, all live on the YouTube channel tonight. So make sure you guys stay tuned in for that. Also, if you guys are on the YouTube side, go over to Apple Podcasts, go over to Spotify. You guys probably have one of those two apps, and just leave a review for Chicago Bulls Central. Whether it's a 5-star review or anything else, just leave a review. It helps out. If you're on the podcast side, go over to the YouTube side. Just hit the subscribe button. Even if you only occasionally watch this show on YouTube, it helps the channel grow for sure. But make sure you guys are following the show at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.